All right, everybody. So, welcome to this class today around studying and understanding our childhood and what kind of got imprinted in our nervous system from our own personal experiences, things that we witnessed, things that we've inherited, and then how potentially this dysregulation or trauma impacts the way we choose partners, romantic partners, and the way we handle these more intimate dynamics. And so, we're going to be exploring a little bit around childhood trauma. We're going to go into a little bit of nervous system development, and then we're going to kind of take all this information and apply it through the lenses of exploring attachment theory and where I kind of, I lean into it and my way of interpreting and understanding attachment theory. And then what some useful tools beyond the attachment theory framework and how we can apply this both for our own personal healing and development, but also that in support of our clients. And for those of you that are interested in this field, it is a growing field. There are a few individuals who are in the field of relationships, sexual, connecting, even tantra, who have a thorough understanding of nervous system trauma regulation, modes of communication, both verbal and somatics, and it's one of the fastest growing fields, and it's a niche. So if this is something that you are looking and it fires up passion within you, you may want to kind of explore expanding on this, and I'm very happy to also point you in different directions to look into research, other trainings, and kind of combine it together to have a more holistic approach in your own practice. So this is two things: one, here, education for your own personal development, and then to support your clients and have a better understanding, and then potentially if you want to grow into this field, you can. All right. So let's start off. You're going to see in your online training that we talk, there are several lectures around childhood trauma and neurodevelopment, and we're going to kind of stick to a specific angle with regards to this lecture here. So in a very concise way of understanding what is happening from a developmental standpoint, the moment of conception, when the sperm and the egg combine and release that zinc spark and the activation of life happens, there's already information that is being coded. So if that moment of conception was under a lot of stress, that information is already immediately coded. If there was dysregulation, that information is coded. If there wasn't enough potential love, security, oxytocin, that information is coded. It turns on certain elements that are extremely important in the gestational development. One of them being very crucial, which is the systematic increase in the release of oxytocin. And there are very few researchers in the world and educators in that matter when it comes, whether fertility studies, we're talking about parenting studies, we're talking about healthy childhood development, and then now nervous system regulation, that actually understand the importance of this and why this is so incredibly crucial. There's only one study that was just published that tells us that, one, it was successfully conducted within lab animals, and now we're seeing that it's successfully being conducted, alluding that potentially for humans this is the case. And what is the study saying? That if you have consistent levels of oxytocin during gestation growing at the natural rate that we are meant to be exposed to, then the offspring has an epigenetic shift within their nervous system, their lens of perception, their health, their emotional well-being, that lasts a lifetime. So this is so important. If you are going to be practicing TVM, working with children, or you're wanting to become a TVM practitioner who works with also pregnancy, conception, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, this is the kind of education that you're going to learn and go in a little bit deeper and understand, and how working with this modality also for expectant parents is a lifelong investment in their offspring's life. So there's a lot of wonderful news here. So we take this information right now, that moment of conception, what is happening right after, in the entire time of gestation. If there is not consistent and increase in the levels of oxytocin, then that is also registering as information. It is literally everything that is happening in utero in terms of neurological development and this intelligence development is turning on. What switches get turned on and when? We discovered now recently that the first 5 days post-gestation, that the DNA goes in and creates. So the DNA is like I have already explained in one of our live calls. Your DNA is kind of like this huge recipe book that you get. And the recipe book maybe has 100 different recipes. You only get 5 Post-its, and you have to pick which ones you're going to be using. And that is your genetic expression of the recipe book. What we know now that these 5 Post-its, the genetics, once they start to express themselves, i.e. that coding is going through and it's creating the cells that are necessary in the expression. So your hair color, your eye color, these are very simple expressions. Different markers and the way the proteins are, getting derived and expressed from your DNA. And if the expression, i.e. the recipe, says, hold on, something's not right here, to the recipe book, which is your DNA strands, it has the influence to go and influence the recipe book and say, hey, rewrite the recipe, this is not right. And the DNA will go and morph and shift. And that is mind-blowing, because I truly believe this does not stop post 5 days into gestation. I truly believe that this is something that is happening all throughout, and it is what explains from a scientific perspective how individuals could, go and have this miraculous type healing, and all of their, for instance, cancer tumors are gone within 5 days. And they were just in a deep sleep. What happened there? What shifted within themselves, other than what I truly believe, what is embedded even further into the DNA? So even the DNA is not perfect, right? This is just an example that the DNA can morph and the DNA can evolve, which means that the DNA can self-correct, which is that self-optimizing code that we are speaking about, which is foundational to the work that we're doing here, and for you to kind of understand where this body of work comes through and why we're able to do things that defy, quote unquote, the limitations of, medical expression, the limitations of all sorts of different things. And again, coming back to that, this is where, right now, because of the level of dysregulation, the level of disconnect, how far we've come away from this self-correcting, self-optimizing code within ourselves, that there's these terminologies now being used in the medical field saying, oh, it is not medically explainable. It is non-medically explainable phenomena, yet we're registering it, which tells me that the framework is limited. Okay, so everything that's happening in utero is preparing the child for life outside of utero. So it's getting in all of this information, and it's really honing in on the stress markers of the mother. So if the mother is stressed, the infant or the fetus is going to be taking on all of this information in preparation for life, to be in that environment, to be actually interacting with a person that is that stressed, that dysregulated. It's saying, okay, we're going to prepare you for this. The world is potentially not a safe place. You may not survive. We need to turn on your fight or flight. We need to activate all of these elements within yourself. And so the child comes prepared. One of the downsides to this is, one, it's a survival mechanism. So it's designed to keep you alive. So an infant that is more on a higher alert state has a higher odds of survival. And an infant that is able to just rest, knowing that it's cared for and safe, and they don't need to cry for everything. But a child or infant that doesn't know that, they need to learn how to activate their voice to alert and say, hey, I'm going to be louder than the other stimulus that is coming your way, that may be turning off your capacity to even pay attention, to know that I'm here, that I have needs. So it's very primal. These are evolutionary switches that get turned on. And so it's really important when we have this kind of research in science, we have to also understand that this means that we have to take care of pregnant women and make sure that their lives are stable, secure, that they're getting all of their needs met. And this is not just, oh, in an ideal world, it would be nice to take care of a mother. This is, whoa, if we are going to be investing in our species, we absolutely have to do this. And so we're coming in and we're understanding that if a mother is dysregulated during gestation, she's going to have also potentially a more complicated birthing process. She may have the body may not feel safe enough to be able to birth. So this is why potentially we're now statistically seeing a massive increase in cesareans. And what is happening when an infant is not able to go through that, it's through the birthing canal, is certain neurological switches don't get turned on. And there's another masterclass that's coming that we kind of go into that a little bit deeper. But then the birthing process, the introduction to the infant into the world could be extremely traumatic, and and it could even disassociate. So an infant in their birthing process into the world could be a disassociative state. So they are completely turned off, numbed out, and disconnected. And then what happens right after birth, there's a 15 minutes document. It's about 15 to 20 minutes window of bonding. If the infant is immediately taken away to be clean, to be whatever these, traditional hospital practices are, then that neuroconnection or activation that is meant to happen in that window is missed. And it's a very hard one for me to even speak about because I am a mother and I was not given that time with both my children. The first one, he was taken away from me. With my daughter, she had to be revived, even though I had a birth plan and I needed her to be next to me. Also, like I did not get that with either one of my children. And only now through TVM am I able to turn on the oxytocin love connection between us. And it breaks my heart because I truly believe that with enough research and science, we can do this much earlier, even for individuals who do not get that bonding window. But education is key. So knowledge is power here. So we take all of our experiences and we learn how to grow from them. Okay. So then what happens literally right after birth? Now the nervous system is still very much plugged into mother. And the infant doesn't even know from a psychological standpoint that it's an independent entity from its mother. And when we look at industrial societies where mothers are forced in order to survive, to provide for their children, not everybody, but a very big majority, this is a phenomena that the industrial machine is demanding that in order for any kind of family, like even a household in the United States today with in a what is quote unquote a traditional household, right? So there's a mother, there's a father, and then there are two kids. You would need at least 2.5 incomes to be able to survive, which means if it's only two individuals who've come together to work, they both have to work full time. And that still won't be enough, which means that economically they would have to downgrade their life. So there's an incredible amount of stress around finances, survival. And when you become a parent, these instincts take over. So they're very, for the most part, take over. So you have this biological and primal desire that it doesn't even matter if you survive. Now you have a continuation of your genetic material here, and their survival is more important than yours. And so parents would do anything to really support their children and help them, live the most amazing life. It's not just because they love them because they're parents. It's an evolutionary trait that you have reproduced another version of you, and that version of you now has the opportunity to do all of the things that potentially you couldn't do. And we can go into like evolution theory, we can go into civilization theory, but we're not going to do that right here. And so what is happening to the infant during this time is a neurological imprint. It is picking up not on the verbal cues, not on the words that are being used, but mostly on somatic cues and what is being communicated from the mother's nervous system This is the most interesting thing. The infant knows not just where the mother is. So there's this almost GPS satellite where the infant knows mom is close by and mom is further away. And then the infant also picks up on how is mom being treated by the other nervous systems around. Is she cared for? Is she loved? These all turn on different switches within the nervous system. And so this is a key point here. Children in, not just infants, but children in general, are heavily influenced by predominantly their mother or their primary care provider, whoever that is, and their caregiver. But predominantly beyond that is mother. There's this very strong neurological hardwiring. Think about it. They were both, in one, so it was two beings in one body, and then they split. And so there's this very strong connection. And then this can also, when they're scientists and researchers are trying to understand like the phenomena of like, mothers and children halfway across the world, and a mother waking up in the middle of the night saying, there's something wrong with my child, even if the child is an adult, they're like, well, what's going on there? And they were researching this phenomena alongside remote viewing and how people are able to turn on this international GPS and feel things. And they found that there's certain parts of the brain that once they're turned on through that bonding process, it's very, very strong and it's very unique, and it allows literally, if I were to compare it to technology, kind of like two walkie-talkies, that one can signal and then the other can receive if it's turned on correctly. And this is how they can feel. Not only can they feel, but then there are some cases where researchers were studying how a mother halfway across the world who hasn't even been in contact with her child knew exactly where the child was and knew that they were in danger and asked for help. And so these are one of those things where you're like, well, how did they know this? And this is where, again, the intelligence of this quantum computer and quantum entanglement and your quantum physics come into intertwine with the expansion of consciousness. And so this is one lens of saying, wow, they're so connected. Look at this phenomena. But yet in industrial societies, when a mother needs to go to work, she has to give up her infant for someone else to take care of it. The infant is very aware of this. The infant is very turned on to this, is very aware of this. And what kind of happens afterwards is this very interesting nervous system phenomena where the infant starts to display dysregulation. And what does this dysregulation look like? It could be the capacity to cling, becoming super clinging, like, no, don't leave me, like feeling really fearful of being abandoned. The infant could start to shut down, stop crying altogether, like numb out, disassociate, disconnect. And this is really sad for me as a parent, when I've seen, like, pardon me, individuals that I know who are, therapists, individuals who are MDs, and they would use the verbiage, oh, what a good baby, because the baby was not fussy or did not cry. And to me, I see that as like, that is not a healthy response. That's a nervous system shutdown. That's a disconnection and a disassociation that's going to create lifelong consequences, both emotionally and, from a health perspective. We all know the ACEs study. And so what is happening then, you have this, very clingy type behavior, the shutdown type behavior, or this like really angry, combative, that in a child comes through this agitation, anxiety of like screaming, crying, throwing tantrums, potentially, even purposely getting in trouble to try and get attention. Any kind of level at this point of co-regulation or comfort or touch or interaction is welcome, even if it comes on with the expense of, hurting somebody else, or potentially even like, being punished or disciplined in some way. And so you have all of these things that start to become very evident. We also have, if a mother was stressed out during gestation, conception, gestation, and then, you know, potentially very traumatic birthing process. For the most part, it could be somebody who's in a lot of pain, again, indicative of not enough oxytocin being released in the body, which signals this is a fight or flight response. So imagine the birthing process in its own right is this very traumatic event, both for the mother and of course for the infant. And this is why there's this beautiful, you know, movement now for more regulated births and more of like, you know, connecting to this new movement of like orgasmic birthing and, you know, all of these wonderful things where it's more of a relaxed atmosphere and management of sensations in a completely different way. All of these have an impact and influence the preparation for a child to enter the world and what to expect. And again, coming back to that, children, for the most part, and research now is telling us this continues into teenage years, they are not learning through the words of what you are teaching a child. They're learning through the upload and download of neuromirroring, or the information that is being sent from the nervous system. You may notice this. If a parent is extremely dysregulated, their children will be extremely dysregulated. If a parent is really grounded, really, regulated, then their children generally would be more calmer, more open to negotiation, more open to having, you know, even accessing reason and logic. And so what has attachment theory taught us, and what can we learn from attachment theory? Attachment theory is this phenomena where, you know, one of the things I think we all desire, whether we're young or older, is to love and be loved. It's this beautiful, you know, very human drive. And this is why, like earlier in this lecture, I was telling you that, you know, there's a huge industry that revolves around love and matchmaking and having better relationships and better sex and better all of these things. And it's one of the most financially successful industries because people really want that. And one thing that is really interesting is that these kind of businesses do not thrive in societies where people are regulated, where children are spending enough time with their mother. There's no scarcity, there's no economic turmoil, there's more of a community feel. These theories don't apply. These kind of businesses just do not apply there. And to me, as a researcher and a therapist and a person who studies human behavior and psychology, this is very indicative of what is happening in industrial societies and how we're losing touch of, you know, systematically from that release of oxytocin, that healthier attachment and bonding that happens during the formative years, where children really need their mothers, really need their caregivers, need to experience things, need to be able to know that everything is okay in the world. You kind of maybe even go into the image of a child who, there was a recent video on social media, but I don't know if you've seen it or not. Let's see if we can get somebody to plug this in here for you. It was a son and the father, I'm assuming, and another adult male, and they were watching a football game together, and somebody scored, and the child got up to cheer, and both the father and the other man kind of were like, no, you know, like. And as soon as the child realized that that was the behavior that he needed to exhibit, he completely went from the cheer to, like, you know, this angry, like, oh no, stance. And it's kind of like very similar to when a child runs and trips and they get up and they look at their parent, they're like, what should I do? And they're not just waiting for the cues to come through, the stimulus to come through, they're also feeling it in their nervous system. And that's how they imprint. And so when an infant knows that its needs are going to be met, that mom or caregiver is always going to come, that that they are safe, and that if they need anything, they will be cared for, it results in a different kind of adult. And you notice it in children immediately. Children are more curious, they're not clingy, they're exploring environments, they're not afraid to trip, they're not afraid to get hurt, even because it's just a different level of activation of curiosity that gets ignited. We do not see this with dysregulated parents and their infants and their toddlers, for instance, and younger children. We see completely different kind of behavior, and this is where there's a lack of education around nervous system development, where certain even doctors and therapists and psychologists who even specialize in childhood psychology, that say, well, you can educate a child and teach them out of these negative patterns or bad behaviors. And this is here where, like, when you understand the neuroscience, what you're teaching them is how to disconnect or disassociate in order to survive. So you're basically making them fawn. And so I know at this point, potentially everyone understands polyvagal theory, and fawning is befriending of the threat. Fawning is, I'm going to make you love me so that I survive. And it's something that happens very much in childhood. It's a pattern that me as a researcher, I don't know anyone else who makes these claims, but I do. That I really believe that all fawning type behavior starts and stems from childhood, from these kind of really misguided tools and education and like theory that a lot of potential doctors, childhood experts, parents even kind of adapt to, around the fact that you can train a child to be quote unquote good or cooperate or whatever. And when you understand that that's not how the nervous system works, anything that you're doing to train a child in essence is turning off certain mechanisms that are there for a reason. From an evolutionary standpoint, as a species, we evolved to have this kind of level of circulation of oxytocin between us as infants and our caregivers. We're meant to know that they are going through life and they are surviving through life. And for us to get this imprint, that's how we're going to get really resilient. Like, whoa, I just felt my parent, or caregiver go through this intense sensation and emotion and everything's okay. Whoa, I can experience this and know that everything's going to be okay. Oh, I can breathe. I can rely on them. I don't have to be the person who suddenly turns off my childhood because I don't trust these caregivers around me. And the reason I don't trust them is because they are so dysregulated, and I can sense that. And that's turning a survival mechanism within me that they may not survive. So I'm on my own. I need to figure out how I'm going to survive. And this is why, like in TVM, we have that point that is in the leg and in the outer hips, and where we identified this very huge theme with children who've experienced, or adults also who've experienced childhood trauma, around not trusting their primary caregivers, that their primary caregivers exhibited behavior or certain types of traits that are synonymous with dysregulation, that turned on this somatic response, survival mechanism within the child. When we asked the individuals I was conducting the research with, well, how would you describe this sensation? It was almost always the same. I'm all alone in the world and no one is coming to save me. And so I have to figure it out on my own. And it's really, it's a big one. It's a big one. So, and it's so common. So if individuals grew up in an industrial society, even if their mother was there with them, they were potentially picking this up from her. She was dysregulated and she was near them. Right now, research is torn. We don't even know what's worse in terms of the impact of the trauma. And this is huge, everybody. This research just recently came out as well. We do not know. The theory right now states that if a child experiences its parents, specifically its mother, go through even one episode of extreme dysregulation, or what would be considered like a psychological meltdown, psychosis, whatever you want to call it. If a child experienced that one time, the impact it has on its nervous system is now through studies deemed more detrimental than actually losing the mother. Like, it's huge to understand that this turns on something inside the nervous system that we should not be turning on in children. So it's important to understand all of this, and this is here not to blame, shame anyone's mother or caregivers or anything like this. This is education so you understand, so that we can course correct as a species. Again, knowledge is power. You have a tool right now that is extremely powerful that can come in and help support and rewire things. So what happens when a child does not trust the adults around it? A lot of individuals and therapists and psychologists and childhood educators say, oh, we are training them to become responsible. So when you put a child to sleep and it cries at night because it needs comfort and it's not feeling that proximity or closeness of its caregivers, and you just say, well, I'm going to let it cry it out to train them to sleep and not need me anymore, you're actually training them to disassociate and disconnect. You're training them and enforcing the idea that their needs do not matter and that indeed no one is coming for you, so you better shut it down in order for you to survive. The initial instinct is, I'm going to be sending out cues to my caregiver, my mother, my father, whoever is around. And I'm trusting as an infant or a child that they're going to pick up on these cues and be able to come and meet them. And that's going to positively reinforce within myself that I matter, I am valuable, and that everything's going to be okay. So even if I feel discomfort for a short period of time, it's always going to result in a favorable outcome and I will be okay. This builds resiliency. This builds all sorts of these wonderful characteristics. It does not make a child weak. It doesn't make them needy. It doesn't make them demanding. These are words in our Western vocabulary when it comes to working with children that we really need to re-educate. We really need to kind of throw out the window and stand up and speak up towards that. There's no such thing as a needy child. If a child is needing extra support, the adults around it are not potentially giving it what it needs in terms of safety, security, and co-regulation. So what is communicated then and what gets turned on is this need to survive. So circuits in the nervous system that were meant to slowly grow and evolve need to get shut down. So the child suddenly now turns off, numbs out, disassociates from its emotions because its emotions it's gonna cause trouble and problems, and it does not want that. It wants to survive. And actually, in fact, indeed, it wants love more than anything. And so what is being taught here is that your emotions result in you being denied of love. You expressing what you're feeling or traveling up and down the cascade will not result in survival. You will result in the withdrawal of love. And to a child, the withdrawal of love is death. And so... And so what we're doing in what I believe severely outdated research and misguidance from a lot of past educators. I don't want to say that anyone in recent years is still advocating this, but this has been something that we're kind of potentially you've experienced in your childhood, something that potentially you've experienced in your young adulthood, in your teenage years from your parents or caregivers. And this is really important to know that there's no such thing as a needy child. What you're turning on is an extreme fawn response. People think that children are becoming really smart when you are training them this way. But in essence, what you're turning on is you're turning on circuitry, and it's driven by extreme fear and extreme fear of abandonment, extreme fear of rejection, extreme fear of withdrawal of love, and extreme fear of being punished. Because the withdrawal of love is also punishment. And it's like, no, you need to love me. What do I need to do to get you to love me? What do I need to do to get you to stay around and take care of me? Do I need to take care of you in order for us to survive? Like, what does that look like? And you will see this with children. And these have lifelong consequences, predominantly because a child is meant to evolve and grow traditionally through different stages, where the evolution was that there's an assumption that there are a loving community around you and your needs will be met, and you have competent, regulated level adults around you that are going to take care of you and take care of your mother, take care of your family, and to be able to lean into this. All of this creates safety, the safety network, security network, that everything's going to be okay. And we've really kind of traveled very far from that. And so what is this constant struggle to survive? I must survive, I must survive, I must survive. It is like emitted from the nervous system, and children pick up on it, and children become very intelligent in the way that they fawn and the way that they communicate to get what they want, to get their needs met. And then as they further develop, this could look like manipulation. And this is like really the seed or the foundation of a lot of thought disorders and personality disorders. They really do stem from childhood trauma and generational trauma, so you can inherit it. And so this is where I kind of also here in your TVM education, we're bridging the gap. Where, in psychology, we have these huge manuals, the DSM-5, for instance, that describes all of these different psychological disorders, thought disorders, etc., and have different labels and names. But really at the root of it, you go all the way back, and it's really this damage that has been created to the way that the genetics, or the memory that is passed through the genetics, in terms of what I need to do in order to survive. And so the misfiring and not turning on, and then the unnatural development of the nervous system results in where we're going now, attachment theory. And attachment theory was based around this research around children who got their needs met and children who didn't, and how they kind of behaved. And they kind of came up with 3 categories, and then they divided them into 4. And now there are probably more, because we're in the realm of post-attachment theory. But I could look at it all from the lens of dysregulation. Secure attachment is one kind, which is regulated attachment, which is secure attachment. I know that my needs are going to be met. I'm going to be able to troubleshoot problems. I'm going to have the capacity within myself to de-escalate. I'm going to have the capacity to be solution-oriented, and I'm going to have the capacity to outsource support if I need it. All of this comes from this really confident, safe space that if you got the imprinting that your needs are met as a child, you're going to be able to have this kind of connection and capacity to soothe yourself, soothe your lover or lovers around you, be able to have clear communication, be able to identify your needs and ask for them, and not try to manipulate or create a way to receive what you need. It just comes from this really safe space within yourself that you can communicate for whatever it is that you desire, and it's not a big deal. And it's not too demanding, it's not too needy. You don't have to manipulate anyone to get it. You don't have to anticipate that you're not going to get it and start to allow that to drive behavior, etc. And what they found is that when children or infants did not get their needs met, i.e. the mother was absent, the research basically had mothers who were coming from extreme economic or psychological distress backgrounds, i.e. they were dysregulated, they were very stressed, very high allostatic load. The children would either reject love, would cry, would be very fearful, would completely disassociate, stop interacting with anybody around them, finds it extremely hard to interact with others. And so they came up with, anxious and fearful and avoidant. And what is that other than looking into the polyvagal theory? And I can take that lens of perception and say, oh, okay, we got fight or flight here, and then we've got dorsal here, and all sorts of different combinations. And what attachment theory has shown us, with all of these other researchers and authors who were studying attachment theory in adults, the way that they kind of connect, is that for the most part, everyone who's dysregulated, i.e. everyone who's not secure, so the avoidant, the anxious, and the fearful, will be attracted to one another. They'll be extremely familiar to one another, and they will start to jump around. So they call it either the tiger and the turtle, or, the chaser, the runner. And so think about it this way. If a person is avoidant and they go into this, fearful state and they hide, and then the tiger is whack, whack, whack at that turtle is going to hide further and further and further into that retreat, into that shell. And they make great matches to one another from a psychological standpoint, because they know how to survive these kind of interactions. They've already done it once during childhood. The reason they're attracted, or you're attracted for the most part, to a person that is similar is because, one, it's a survivable event, but then two, from an evolutionary standpoint, now you're in action potential. Now you actually have the opportunity to go and heal this or complete the incomplete cycles with someone that feels safe to your nervous system, feels familiar, it's firing up all of this love. But this is where you really need to kind of either find an expert to help you work through this and heal both your traumas, so that you are able to break free from the patterns. And one thing is really important to know, that the patterns that we develop in childhood are very hardwired within us. Specifically, if you have a high ACEs score, if you've experienced insecure attachment as a child, you literally learned how to survive by utilizing this intelligence or fawning response. And the fawning response is a very manipulative one, because you're not communicating clearly. Basically, you're afraid of the person that you love, and you're afraid of them, and in that fear, you may hate them. You may love them and hate them at the same time. You may love them and blame them at the same time. You may, love them and desire all of these things, and it's all on them. And it's, and or you may be doing the opposite. You may be like victimizing yourself in this process and saying, I'm so loving and I'm the empath and you're the narcissist, or whatever verbiage that you want to use it and view it through. We're just simplifying it. Dysregulation. It's the dysregulated table. You're dancing on it. And and you would be in a finding response. A finding response turns on survival within your body. Suddenly, you may notice that after all of the heightened chemistry of your attachment, or your romantic dynamic starts to fade away, that you're now suddenly in a very combative, loving dynamic, or fearful one, or where your nervous system now is anticipating 10 steps down the line what your romantic partner or partners are going to do. And you're preparing for step number 10, even though the interaction did not take place. It's a perception of what's going to happen. So in that very beginning, a romantic dynamic with a person that feels familiar, your nervous system is learning. This is why we're so interested. Like, what's your favorite color? And what do you do here? And we're just like watching like a hawk and feeling everything is super intense, and ignoring all the red flags, and blanketed through all of these wonderful, chemistry. And I want to tattoo your name on my body and make 10 babies, or whatever it is, adopt babies, or grow a business together, or here we go, let's go join our bank accounts. And you're really kind of like, all the red flags, you're ignoring them. All of the reason and logic, you may be ignoring it because of this flood of chemicals in your body. And during the flood of the chemicals, you're also coding. So this is why it's hard for you to kind of forget about an ex or exes. And when you think about them, even if the relationship wasn't so wonderful, you may kind of smile and think, oh, it's so wonderful. Let's get back together and try that again. Why? Because you coded the dynamic in the very beginning through very strong neurocoders and neurotransmitters that are giving you that dopamine hit, that are giving you that rush, all of that oxytocin, and making you feel really, really good, and making you ignore all the red flags. And so even if the red flags were present, they're like, no, I don't see one. I don't see any smoke signals coming through here. Or alarm bells. I can't hear any alarm bells. And what is happening is, you later on, once all of that chemistry kind of fades away, now you're kind of dealing with the reality. And guess what? All of that information, the red flags and the alarm bells, your nervous system was already getting information. It was studying it in order for you to survive the relationship. So that's how you may notice that The moment you see your partner or partners or lovers, you get excited. A part of you gets excited, but are you getting excited to see them? Or are you getting excited to start a fight or survive a fight? And this is a really important question. If you don't have secure attachment, more often than not, that's what's happening, whether it's very subtle in the interaction or it's quite explosive, and it can become extremely addictive. This is what research shows us, is that individuals who are alone, their brains light up a certain way. Individuals who are in healthy partnerships, their brains light up and highlight the parts of the brain that code for memory and safety and love. And then we see very grounded access to reason, logic, like, big portions of the brain light up. The most amount of access of your brain is lit up when you are in a healthy romantic dynamic. That's why people who are in healthy romantic dynamics that are longer in their time of connection, statistically live longer, are happier, are healthier, are more intelligent, more successful, have bigger bank accounts, and their brains, for the most part, even if they were in a dynamic for 20, 15, 25 years, light up similar to what a person who just met, which defies older research. We thought that kind of lighting up of chemistry dies off after about anywhere between 2 months to 2 years. That's not the case whatsoever. If you have healthy attachment, you can have that firework sensation in your body and in your nervous system, and overall such a worthy investment, because statistically speaking, it will make your life better. On the other hand, when individuals are in a romantic dynamic that is dysregulated, disharmonious, they actually live the shortest. So even individuals who are alone or single live longer. So individuals who are in combative or dysregulated dynamics live shorter, are more prone to health problems, are more prone to having financial issues. So if your bank account is not happy, you may want to look at healing your nervous system so that you can also find love and secure attachment. And that is one way to change your life. So we see that happening with individuals who are in dysregulated relationships. They score the lowest across the board. And what's interesting is that the parts of their brain that light up when they think about their partners are the parts of the brain that release that dopamine hit, and addiction centers light up, which means you are addicted to the dysfunction. It's kind of like what happens if you think about it, if you stretch out abuse or romantic abuse in Stockholm syndrome. How does that happen? That's extreme fawning. Stockholm syndrome is extreme fawning, that eventually the person that is hurting you the most is the person that you love the most, that you want to protect the most, because you have to establish those neural networks in order for you to survive. It's not the truth, and it's so hard when that lens of perception gets turned on. And this is for you here as a somatic therapist to understand that when a person comes to you, a client or a patient comes to you, and they are leaving an abusive dynamic or an abusive relationship, or struggling to leave an abusive relationship, it's kind of like it's an addiction. You cannot judge or blame, and this starts first within yourself. If you've ever been in abusive dynamics, people can be in them for years and learn how to survive, and actually even on some level thrive on the outside, but on the inside they're extremely dissatisfied, and there's some level of awareness around that. There's some level of anxiety, dissatisfaction, frustration that makes them also lash out. And so it's important to understand that it is because the parts of the brain skew the lens of perception in order for the person to stay. So even if you have a friend, or you are in it, or you have a client that you see that they're in an abusive relationship, and you can see it, and you can tell them, hey, this doesn't feel healthy, and they cannot see it, it's to just extend compassion to yourself and compassion to them. It literally is the way the brain is processing information. All you have to do is keep offering co-regulation to yourself. If you're in this kind of dynamic, keep offering co-regulation to individuals that you know, and keep offering TVM treatments and sessions to your clients who are in these dynamics. They will eventually feel enough love and groundedness within themselves to say, I will not tolerate this anymore. The regulation will allow them to snap free from this. specifically with a lot of oxytocin. And so now we come back to, you know, we start to, as adults, if we've experienced dysregulation as children, or we've experienced trauma as children, we grow up to want to become our own heroes. We grow up to want to complete the incomplete cycles. And more often than not, how are individuals doing this? They're doing it with their romantic partner or partners. They're going in, and if there's enough safety and regulation happening, and that all that warm, fuzzy feeling in the very beginning, we said, of the dynamic, you're going to go in and you're going to want to activate all of the trauma from childhood. And this can turn into a whole bunch of drama in your romantic relationships, and wanting your partner to potentially fulfill the role of a parent. All of these kind of like misfirings can come through. And this is where, one, we have to have enough education to understand, as a rule, as a foundational rule, if you have childhood trauma that's unresolved, please know that it will come up and act up in your romantic dynamics. It's exactly the same. You wanted to be loved unconditionally, and what is happening is the reason we act childish also in our romantic dynamics, if we have unresolved trauma from childhood, is literally the nervous system is trying to complete the rehabilitation of the circuits that never got turned on or matured correctly. And that takes time. However, there's a faster way, which is the tools that you're learning right now with TVM. So this is the kind of knowledge right now for you to kind of know that if you've experienced childhood trauma, or your client has experienced childhood trauma and it's unresolved, it will show up. And think about it this way: there's this child that has never grown up inside, and suddenly now we're mixing up, our desire to mate, our desire to have sex, and potential sexual energy, and it becomes this not a very healthy recipe for interaction. Let me just put it that way. And it can cause a lot of pain and a lot of confusion, and you can end up getting hurt or hurting others. And it really stems from these elements of ourselves that are unresolved or unregulated. I'm wanting to kind of go back into understanding that the attachment theory does not apply to certain backgrounds. So when they were studying attachment theory and they were like, okay, well, we're going to go and study attachment theory in Iran and India and in South Africa, they came back and they were like, hold on a second, these theories do not apply here. They don't make any sense, which basically tells me as a researcher that this phenomena of dysregulation is predominantly an industrialized country problem. And again, going back into the stemming, that the mothers are not getting the regulation, support, nourishment they need in order to rear infants. And there's a systematic generational suppression of oxytocin. And so this also drives us from an evolutionary standpoint, even all throughout our life, the desire to love and to feel love. And we really crave it. We crave something that we know we can feel, even if we can't feel it or we haven't felt it yet. But there's this innate knowing within us, or a desire to feel that. And so this is important for you to also know that these kind of like this entire lecture and the case studies are all related to industrial society, industrial countries, where this is the case, where this is this is the truth. And so there are other elements here to also keep in mind, that this dysregulation that happens also means that the fawning response gets activated. And with the fawning response, like we said, there's this manipulative kind of, whether it's conscious or unconscious energy that comes through. We're not saying what we really want. We're not expressing our needs clearly. We're hoping that the other person can potentially read our minds and give us what we want. And if they don't, we're going to lash out and say, well, you don't love me enough, because how could you not know what I need? And all sorts of different things. Or if a person is dysregulated, and they favor their friends and their family over their partner's needs, and the partner could say, well, I'm not important enough, like how could you be behaving this way? These are all different examples of fawning responses and the incapacity to be clear with what we need, what we want, and how we can ask for it in a healthy way, and how to create healthy boundaries as well. So another thing that we notice with dysregulated relationships is that the phenomena of trauma bonding. Okay, so basically both partners become addicted to the fighting. It's the addiction center that's turned on, and it's the reward center that's turned on. And the more you fight, the better you're going to feel, even though at the end of the day you're exhausted and it's not what you want. And so that's literally how the trauma bonding happens. Trauma bonding can also mean that, you know, I can share with you my trauma and you can share your trauma. And if it's kind of compatible and we can feel it through our nervous systems, we're going to get along just fine. And we're going to find a level of affinity because of that similarity. I can feel you. I know your pain. You can feel me. You know my pain. And therefore you understand me and I understand you. And oh, isn't that so beautiful to have a partner that gets me and I get you? Except that's not the case. These are just parts of the brain that get turned on. And so it's just important for us to understand that this phenomena also happens and it's not healthy. So trauma bonding is something that happens very much in romantic dynamics where there is this kind of dependency that also happens. So another thing that happens in these insecure attachments is very deep codependency and the disillusion of independence. Again, if you go back to the very beginning of the lecture, remember what happens when we're evolving as children. We don't know that we're a separate entity from our parents. And if our parents are dysregulated and we start to have dysregulation within ourselves, there's an opportunity for these networks to try and rehabilitate themselves. And in it, they may stop becoming a person, and now suddenly you're now blended with your caregiver and you have this joint body, and it's not healthy. It's not healthy if you're not able to do things or make decisions or have time alone or apart. All of these are indicative of, wow, there was trauma that got registered very early on, potentially within the first 2 to 5 years of life, where the child was not able to develop these circuits that allowed it to become independent in a healthy, secure way, knowing that it's welcome to always come back. You can go fly, spread your wings in the world and come back, and there's always going to be a home for you here and love for you here, and develop that healthy curiosity and a sense of adventure that we all need, blended with a sense of safety. And this is why there are a lot of these very famous lecturers right now and therapists that talk about the balance between the sense of adventure and safety. And I really believe that this also comes from, childhood trauma, and that if you weren't able to develop those circuits in a healthy way, that one, I was a part of my mom or my caregiver, and we were one, and all my needs got met, and that circuitry eventually evolved into, I can go into the world and have curiosity and adventure, and I can always come back, and I'm loved and I'm safe and there's someone holding me. If that did not get developed, a person is very prone in their adulthood to have romantic dynamics with problems around independence, codependence, very clingy in terms of partnership, very insecure in their needs. And this is for you as a trauma therapist, as a person that's coming in with a very high level of education and knowledge of nervous system circuitry, are able to eventually potentially, learn for your own self and your own self-development, but also educate others around. And so it's just a different lens of perception to what other bodies of work are out there and the way that they're interpreting it. And one of the things that I love about TVM and the work that I do is this capacity that I have to take very big, complex concepts and turn them into very simplified concepts so that you can, one, learn it faster, and then two, hopefully be able to educate, empower your clients moving forward. So now we're going into that codependency independency. And then what comes out of that, another element or face of that fawning, is our incapacity to communicate clearly. So there's a problem with the way that we're communicating verbally, and then there's a problem with the way that we're communicating somatically. So it's important for you to understand that as an adult, we're communicating both verbally and somatically at the same time. So you can see that my hands are moving around as I'm communicating. These are all my head is moving around, my facial expressions to change. These are all cues that your nervous system, if you're watching this, you can even hear it in the intonation of my voice, the change in my breath and the pitch and the intonation is sending also a message other than the words that I'm sending. For the most part, if you are dysregulated and you are highly sensitized, you're going to be paying way more attention to the somatic cues coming your way and where my nervous system's at. And you're going to be paying attention to what I'm actually saying. And unless you felt really safe with me, then potentially you'd be able to listen to more of the words that I'm saying and paying less attention to what is being communicated from my body or my nervous system to you. And this is why we see this phenomena where a lot of people are like, I'm highly empathic. And that is that circuitry shift that happens in childhood when an adult comes to me and says, I'm highly empathic. And I asked, well, when this, like, I was a super genius child and I'm highly empathic and I can feel everything everywhere. And this is not something that they kind of went to self-development to cultivate, but clearly when I look at their intake form that they've experienced childhood trauma, I will know that their circuits got switched and they never got the healthy maturation of a child in its development, where it was just going through that safe security and safety of the adults around them being regulated, safety that all of their needs are met, that the world is indeed a safe and magical place and that they can thrive. But that is a survival mechanism that got turned on. So this is really important for you to also know that yes, being highly empathic is important, but it can be exhausting too. Exhausting to be in a space and not knowing who's feeling what. Or is it your feelings or someone else's feelings, and being on high alert trying to decipher all of this information. Please know that if that is the case, then that is indicative of that circuitry getting turned on prematurely in your childhood as a survival mechanism, or that of your clients. So what happens is this lens of perception of existence becomes extremely skewed. I was just working with a client the other day, and the client said, I was talking, this is a client who flew in to work with me one-on-one, and the client was speaking to my daughter and asking my daughter, are you excited about your new school? And my daughter said, yeah, I'm really, really excited. And this client was like, whoa, that was the moment that I realized that my experience in childhood is not the only experience, that not everybody's afraid to go and meet other people. She's like, her experience was that just going to the thought of interacting with adults or to go to school and meet other children was so terrifying and a crippling thought that she'd have to summon courage to be able to go and do this. And that's when she was like, wow, now I truly now understand that there's another way of living life completely that is independent from my personal experience and that doesn't nullify my personal experience. And I was like, yes, exactly. And so please understand that individuals who've experienced childhood trauma are perceiving the world in a completely different way. And it shows up in the way that they select partners, the partners that they're attracted to, and the partners that they stick around with. And it has nothing to do, there's no need to be ashamed of it. And there's no blame here whatsoever. It literally is a survival mechanism, and the nervous system is looking at it as an opportunity to go and complete and heal. So it's not a bad thing. It's a way of the intelligence of your body trying to go and heal what was not healed in childhood. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind, pardon me. Oh, excuse me. So the other thing to keep in mind is that when we are in the skewed lens of perception around communication verbally and somatically, we may be misreading the room. We may be misreading what is happening around us. We may suddenly feel safe in situations that are not safe. We may feel threatened when situations are actually really safe. And so this lens of perception becomes extremely, like we said, it's not real. and it's skewed, what can happen is that we can misread if a person is attracted to us. We can misread if a person even says, hey, I'm really into you, I'm attracted to you. We could go into, what do you want from me? You know, like, oh, like this person's going to hurt me. I'm going to be on standby. I'm going to get to know you more because you are potentially a threat to me. You know, it could look like that. It could be the other way around. It could be like, oh, I really think that person's into me and I'm misreading the cues, and I go for it, and I you know, push myself onto a person in a situation where that person's like, whoa, I don't know what you're reading here, but I'm not interested in that way. And then I could go into contraction and say, oh my goodness, you know, I'm rejected from the world, and let me never do this again. And so all of these things can be happening when we have this skewed lens of perception due to the childhood trauma, specifically when it comes to romantic dynamics. And what that does is that it creates sometimes behavior from our end or that of the individuals that we're with that hurt us. We could end up in situations that we were not able to vocalize our true consent to. We may end up in situations where we are taking from a person without them giving consent for a thing to be given. We may be giving something to a person that we don't really want to give, because we're worried about, you know, being hurt, being rejected, all sorts of different things. And so it's really, really important to know that there's this other body of work that was created called the Wheel of Consent around just understanding this phenomena a little bit more. And before we wrap this up, and you can go into the Wheel of Consent and kind of study it, and there are amazing free YouTube videos around it, and also trainings, and you can go really deep into it, and it's a really valuable tool. Nonviolent communication is another one that's really wonderful. Looking into the research of the Gottman Institute is another one where they talk about, you know, they've been conducting through the Love Lab, I believe 30 or even maybe more at this point, years of research in Seattle, where they studied couples, and what they found was, they were looking for what are the markers that would keep a relationship sustained for a long period of time, and what are the markers that would get married individuals to divorce. And they found the patterns, and the patterns really came down to communication and empathy and compassion, and being able to not see, this is a difference. This is secure attachment versus non-secure attachment, and you can train yourself. But individuals who were secure could anticipate that, oh, I'm picking up on the nervous system of my partner, feeling a little stressed. I'm going to be extra compassionate. I'm going to say, hey, you know, is everything okay? How can I make it better? Here, let me do something to help you soothe. They were able to pick up on the partner's needs and distress before the person would vocalize it, but also when the person was vocalizing, even in problematic situations, they were the only individuals who were able to de-escalate and be solution-oriented versus problem-oriented and wanting to escalate. The individuals who had the statistics that proved that they would not stay together, they were more prone to divorce, were individuals who did certain communication traits. One, they would increase their voice, they would nullify, gaslight the other person, they would go into the silent, what's called the silent treatment, and all sorts of different things, you know, making the other person walk on eggshells. They were able to see this very clearly within one day of studying a couple, if they were going to statistically stay together or not. And so it's important to know that it really comes down, everything, if we take everything down, is to getting onto that regulated table where you're able to have happiness, joy, love, clear communication, clear somatic communication, be able to express your needs without you feeling contracted or scared. The last dynamic love relationship that I was in, we went out on to have dinner together, and I could immediately sense that there was an attraction from this person. There was a clear attraction from me to them as well. And I was really honest about it, what I wanted. I was very clear. I was like, look, I'm at this point right now where I'm not looking for anything other than monogamy. And I'm looking for a long-term dynamic, and that's the only thing that's on the table that's available for me. And it came from a really grounded, safe space of love for me, and it was love that these are my needs right now, and this is what I got very clear within myself to what I need, so I could be very clear in my communication. This could have looked extremely differently. This could have been like, we were flirting. Should I tell him that I have children? Should I not? Should I tell him what I do? And none of those things came through to my mind. It was very clear. I was like, and it comes from this space of clarity within. Again, when you get crystal clear with who you are and where you are in your own healing journey, you can become extremely clear in your communication and where your weaknesses are. I was very clear that day where I was like, I don't like to call myself a single mother. I like to call myself committed to love mother. So I'm very intentional with the words. And we had a little laugh around that. And then I was just like, very clear, like, as we were leaving, this person wanted to have a little bit of a dance. As we were dancing and finishing up the dance, I was like, look, like this is what's available on the table before we move any further. And not to scare them, not to, it was just, there was no even thought in my mind. Like, it didn't even come across in my mind that, oh, this is the wrong time for me to mention this. It actually came to me as this is the right time to mention this, because before we move into anything else that may involve more heightened sensations and feelings, potential touch, potential intimacy, etc., that this is extremely important. And there's no hard feelings. And it really surprised me, because to me that was like, whoa, evidence that I was moving away from that dysregulated table of fear of a potential, worry of being judged, or my needs are too much or too little, or I'm too needy or demanding, or whatever label that we tend to put on romantic dynamics. So the invitation here is to go into that childhood trauma, figure out, start to heal it, figure out what your attachment styles are, identify, how you're jumping around these different attachment styles, and how you're interacting, how you are potentially right now, you or individuals, really in a more of a survival dynamic than a love and thriving dynamic. Something that was really beautiful that was shared with me recently was that this person that had healed their childhood trauma said, I felt that I was repeating the patterns of my parents one way or another. And when I went in to intentionally start to change those, that I would be different, the people that I was attracted to romantically and that were attracted to me suddenly changed. And this is, you may have heard this in one of my previous lectures, what I called, something that I found early on in my therapy practice, my therapeutic practice, was a phenomena that I called, different face, same relationship. You end up doing the same thing all over again. It's because of the circuitry, it's because of the dysregulation. And so back to this person sharing, I went in and I healed my childhood trauma, and suddenly I discovered that, one, I was attracted to a different kind of person that is very unfamiliar. So she's like, whoa, like I wasn't even sure what to do with this kind of person, because this is new territory to me. And then two, the individuals that she was attracting, that were coming into her life in the romantic sense and sexual sense, were also extremely different than what she had previously known and experienced. And she really attributes this, it was like this shocking thing that happened. And she's also like a therapist and a coach. And she said, wow, it really came down to working on healing and changing the patterns that were, one, my childhood patterns, and then the patterns that we imprint on. We go in and if we've seen our parents behave in certain ways, we're going to try to replicate the behavior as an adult again, because it's that mimicking behavior. We are learning through neuromirroring. It's a natural phenomena. We're not learning through the words that are being spoken to us as much as we are learning from the somatic cues. And so please understand that when you are in your own romantic dynamic as well, you're needing to pay attention to your verbal cues, and you're needing to pay attention to the somatic cues and that of your partner/partners. So there are lots of things for you to go and explore here to understand a little bit deeper around how important your nervous system development is from childhood, how important it is for all children, so that we can grow up and be more optimized, have better relationships, have more fulfilling relationships, be able to feel and experience more love, and overall, like all of the wonderful things that come with that. Like we said, increase in longevity, health, well-being, life scores, life satisfaction scores, bigger success in terms of work and satisfaction with the creative output, and also bigger bank accounts. So I hope this was beneficial to you and may plant some incentive and seeds for you to go and explore a little bit more the different concepts that you have been introduced to here today. Thank you for being with me.